British Columbia is truly a very recent experiment. People came here to chase their dreams. It's a place where you could do that.
Still is a kind of promised land for a lot of people. Families have survived and families have thrived.
When they discovered gold in the Fraser and that news went out into the world showed up basically overnight. That set up the foundational dynamic between the settlers and the indigenous people.
The small-town vibe of British Columbia contrasts sharply with its vast, untamed natural wonders. This realm of sky-high mountains, endless forests, and secretive deserts carries ancient stories molded by early dwellers and daring pathfinders. Its rich lands, fraught with conflict and marked by historical battles, shape what its people choose to call home. A history filled with intense quarrels, and the lure of gold has attracted a mosaic of dreamers and seekers. Join us as we explore the countless adventures that have shaped British Columbia, a place where the echoes of history mingle with the untamed beauty of the wilderness, the wildest corners of British Columbia. British Columbia is a truly beautiful place on Earth. Located on the western side of Canada, this region is known for its vast, breathtaking natural landscapes. Imagine this, an area filled with deep, narrow sea inlets known as fjords, towering, majestic mountains, endless expanses of forests, and, surprisingly, a tiny area of desert too. Despite all these natural wonders, it's interesting to note that most people who live in BC choose to stay in a small region in the southwestern part of the province. It's quite fascinating to think about why such a large portion of British Columbia remains almost untouched and deserted. Diving deeper into what makes British Columbia stand out, it's challenging to find any other place in Canada that rivals its stunning natural beauty. However, despite all these picturesque settings, the vast majority of BC's inhabitants reside in just a few places, primarily in the cities of Vancouver and Victoria. This concentration of population isn't random, but is influenced by the geography and nature of the land. So one might wonder, why do people prefer these condensed areas over the wide expanse available to them? To understand British Columbia better, let's travel back in time. The region is more than just scenic views. It holds a rich history that intertwines with the lives of the indigenous people known as the First Nations. It also includes the narratives of European explorers and settlers who arrived later, shaping what is now known as Canada. Before the arrival of these explorers and settlers, the indigenous peoples had been inhabiting the area for thousands of years, living in harmony with the land. This history is crucial in understanding not only the past, but also the present dynamics of British Columbia. In what we now call British Columbia, there were many First Nations communities like the Haida, Salish, and Nuchanuth, among others. These communities were not just small, random gatherings of people. They had very complex and rich cultures. Their traditions, ways of life, and deep connections to the land were unique and profound. For example, the Salish peoples are believed to have settled in the region thousands of years ago, between 3,000 and 6,000 years, to be more specific. They, along with other First Nations groups, built societies with their own rules, beliefs, and ways of making a living. All this happened long before any Europeans came to their lands. The lives of these First Nations communities were intricately woven with the nature around them. They understood the land and the sea deeply and respected the balance of the environment. Their knowledge wasn't just about survival, it was about living in harmony with nature. Each community had its own special way of doing things, its own stories, and its own systems for teaching the young and taking care of the elderly. They had rich spiritual beliefs and held celebrations that showed respect for the land, the animals, and each other. These communities were also traders and innovators, managing the resources of their rich land with careful thought. They fished the vast waters, hunted the dense forests, and gathered from the earth, all the while ensuring that the natural world would remain bountiful for generations to come. Their economic systems, social structures, and cultural practices were diverse and sophisticated, reflecting a deep understanding and respect for their environment. Then, a significant change occurred in what we now call British Columbia. This change began in the 1700s, when European explorers landed on these shores. Initially, there were two main groups of Europeans exploring this area, the Spanish and the British. Both were driven by a desire to discover new lands and riches. However, it was the British, particularly those working for the Hudson's Bay Company, who truly left a lasting impact.
He was born in British Guiana to a Scottish father and a mixed-race black mother.
His father sent him to Scotland to school, and then he joined the fur trade when he was something like age 16.
He works his way up until he's second in command of the whole Hudson's Bay Company operation on the Pacific Northwest.
The Hudson's Bay Company was one of the important chartered companies of the British Empire.
They established trading posts and focused on trading furs, which was lucrative due to the region's abundant wildlife and remote nature. These trading activities led to the establishment of small centers for trade, which became the early hubs of European activity in the region. Through these centers, Europeans came into contact with the indigenous peoples. These interactions varied greatly. At times, they were peaceful and cooperative, and at other times, they were tense and conflictual. However, this marked the beginning of a new chapter in the region's history. Then came the 1800s, and with it, a major event that would shape the future of British Columbia and its neighboring lands. This was the big argument over a place called the Oregon Country.
That prior to the 49th parallel being drawn in 1846, there was this fur trade world, which ran from right below the Alaskan Panhandle all the way down to what is today's Oregon-California border. Fort Vancouver, their capital, if you will, was in present-day Washington state.
Imagine a huge piece of land that stretches all the way from what's now the top of California up to the bottom edge of what was then Russian territory in Alaska. This wasn't just a small piece of land, it was massive and full of resources. Now, imagine 4 different groups: Spain, Russia, Britain, and the United States, all saying, "This is mine." That's what happened. They all had different reasons for their claims, like who got there first or set up trade. The British and the Spanish tried to sort out some of their disagreements with something called the Nootka Convention at the end of the 1700s, which helped a bit. Then, there were the Americans, who said this land was theirs because of the adventures of Lewis and Clark, 2 explorers who mapped out a lot of the area, and because of a trading post set up by a guy named John Jacob Astor and his Pacific Fur Company. Going back in time, we see battles and gold rushes in the 1800s that shaped British Columbia. Discover what attracted people to this tough land. Rush for gold shapes a new place. Back then, this period was really significant and a big deal for everyone involved because it was about who would end up controlling a huge, wealthy area. But it was much more than just a fight over a piece of land. It was about the treasures the land held, the strength it would give, and the chance to grow bigger. Different groups, made up of people like explorers, merchants, and those who wanted to start new lives, were all trying to mark their territory. They wanted to put down their flags to show, "We're here, and this is ours." This time was packed with all kinds of talks, exciting journeys, and at times, fights over who would get the most benefits from this vast region in North America. When people from America began to settle in what was called the Oregon Country, the stress between Britain and the United States really started to heat up. This strain was part of a bigger picture known as manifest destiny. This concept was the belief that it was the Americans' destiny, their unavoidable future, to spread across and own all the land stretching to the West Coast. They rallied behind a strong phrase, 54 degree, 40, or fight. This slogan meant they were determined to see their nation's boundary extend all the way up to the latitude line marked at 54°40 north. This line would have included a big chunk of what today is known as British Columbia. But after plenty of back-and-forth discussions and talks, both countries came to a compromise. They settled on a different boundary, the 49th parallel, as the agreed-upon border in the Oregon Treaty of 1846. By agreeing to this, the United States didn't take all the land they initially wanted, and Vancouver Island remained under British rule. This agreement cooled down the tensions and set a clear line between the two. This decision marked a turning point for the region's destiny. As a result, two British colonies were established: the colony of Vancouver Island in 1849, followed by the colony of British Columbia in 1858. The creation of the second colony was spurred by an event known as the Fraser Canyon Gold Rush.
California Gold Rush is one of the few places where most historians agree genocide took place.
This event was monumental, attracting droves of people, including a significant number of Americans, all flocking to the region with the same dream: to find gold and become wealthy overnight.
It arrived there in no time. People realized that there was gold on this Fraser River that was to the north in this obscure territory that they didn't really know much about. The newspapers were
Post in the Fraser Canyon. It suddenly becomes the new sort of global hotspot for gold.
The influx of these hopeful individuals transformed the area almost instantly. By 1866, the two colonies decided to merge, forming a single, larger British colony. This merger was more than a political move. It signified the coming together of diverse cultures and hopes, paving the way for what would become a region full of opportunities. Today, we recognize this area as British Columbia, a name that resonates with prominence not just in Canada, but globally. Its strategic position along the Pacific Ocean elevates its importance, serving as a crucial gateway for trade and cultural exchange between Canada and the rest of the world. British Columbia is distinctive, primarily due to its breathtaking natural beauty. The province offers a picturesque array of landscapes, from the serene, sandy beaches that grace the Pacific coastline to the majestic Rocky Mountains that stand tall, encompassing vast forests and winding rivers. But the beauty of British Columbia extends beyond its visual appeal. The varied terrain influences the climate in unique ways, creating micro-environments within the province. Some areas are drenched in rainfall, fostering lush green landscapes, while others enjoy a drier, cooler climate. This diversity is not limited to the weather. It extends to the flora and fauna, making British Columbia a treasure trove of wildlife and natural wonders. The rich and diverse landscape of British Columbia does more than offer scenic views. It shapes the lives of its inhabitants. The variety in geography means that there are numerous activities and sports to partake in, catering to all kinds of interests, from skiing down snowy slopes to navigating the waters of the vast ocean. But the impact of this diverse landscape is not only recreational. It influences the economic opportunities available, the development of communities, and the lifestyle of the people. Different regions within the province have different resources and attractions, leading to varied local economies and ways of life. This diversity is what makes British Columbia not just a unique place within Canada, but also a distinctive region on the global stage, celebrated for its natural beauty, cultural variety, and economic opportunity. The coastal area of British Columbia, known for its breathtaking scenery, includes the well-known Inside Passage. Imagine a wild, untouched coastline filled with deep, narrow sea valleys called fjords, tiny to large inlets, and over thousands of islands, with Vancouver Island and the Haida Gwaii group of islands standing out among them. This part of British Columbia is really shaped by the nearby Pacific Ocean, which brings a lot of rain and keeps temperatures pretty moderate year-round, especially compared to other parts of Canada. This creates lush, green coastal rainforests, with the Great Bear Rainforest being one of the largest rainforests of its kind in the whole world. This rainforest isn't just trees. It's a living, breathing place full of animals, including the unique Kermode bear, often called the spirit bear, because of its rare white fur. As you move away from the ocean and go inland, the land starts to climb and turn into the coast mountains. These are not your everyday hills, but massive, snow-capped peaks that reach the clouds, covered with ice at the higher elevations. These big mountains do more than just provide a pretty backdrop. They act like a giant wall that stops the moist ocean air from moving further inland, which is why the coast gets so much rain and the interior areas are much drier. People love these mountains for their breathtaking beauty and the adventures they offer, like hiking, skiing, and mountain biking. Whistler, located here, is not just any place. It's known all over the world as a top spot for skiing and snowboarding, attracting visitors from every corner of the globe. Beyond the foggy coasts and high mountains, British Columbia has more stories. Let's step into its heart and see the different worlds inside. Secrets beyond big mountains. Yet, there's way more to British Columbia than just its shores and tall mountains. If you go past the big coast mountains, you'll get into the middle part of the province, a place with its own unique sights. Over here, you can see the Columbia Mountains. And while some people might think they're part of the Rockies, they're actually a whole different set of mountains. Imagine being able to send home postcards filled with pictures of huge mountains reaching up to touch the sky, valleys that go on as far as the eye can see, and lakes so clear they look like they're made of glass. This central area isn't just about good views, though. It's packed with quiet little towns and lively cities, turning it into more than just a pretty place. It's a full-on, exciting spot for living and adventuring. Whether you like hiking up hills, fishing in streams, or climbing big rocks, or even if you just want to sit back and enjoy the scenery, the heart of British Columbia is like a never-ending playground for finding new things and having fun. It's not just a spot for a quick visit. It's a place where you can really dive in and feel like part of the grandeur. Right in the middle of these giant mountain chains, there's a huge, high-up area known as the Interior Plateau. This big stretch includes different spots like the Caribou, the Chilcotin, and one that's really famous, the Okanagan. The Okanagan Valley is super special because it's sunny a lot and is known all over as a great place for growing grapes and making wine. This is pretty different from the usual rainy, tree-filled coast of British Columbia. And here's something that might catch you off guard. The lower part of this valley is so dry, it's actually considered a desert. This is pretty unusual for a province that most people connect with big green rainforests and mountains covered in snow. As you move further north, leaving behind the sun-baked and dry terrains, you enter a totally different world, the northern interior of British Columbia. This huge area is mostly untouched by people. It's wild and unrefined, surrounded by the big Canadian Rockies and the less famous, but just as breathtaking, Cassiar Mountains. In this part of the province, nature is in charge. You'll find thick woods and wide-open spaces that are the homes of an amazing variety of animals. Imagine seeing groups of caribou moving together, families of bears, and single moose wandering around. This is a spot in the province where the wildness hasn't been lost, making it a safe place for animals and a dream spot for anyone who loves the outdoors. But there's more to British Columbia than just its land. Water is also a huge part of what makes this place special. The province is crossed by big rivers like the Fraser, Columbia, and Skeena. Each of these rivers has its own special story and plays a big part in shaping both the land and the lives of people in British Columbia. Take the Fraser River, for example. It's not just a simple stream. It's incredibly important, stretching over 800 miles long. It cuts through a huge part of the interior plateau, affecting both nature and the way people live along its edges. These rivers are more than just water. They're central to life here. The Fraser River in particular, has shaped the land and communities from the mountains to the sea. It's a vital path for salmon, which are crucial not only to the local ecosystem, but also to the culture and economy of the region's indigenous peoples and settlers. The Columbia and Skeena rivers also carve through the landscape, creating fertile valleys and supporting a wide array of life. These waterways have been highways for centuries, used by First Nations for travel and trade, long before European settlers arrived. Despite British Columbia's varied and stunning landscapes, which range from dry desert valleys and fertile wine countries to lush rainforests and snow-covered mountains, a majority of its population opts to settle in the lower southwestern corner of the province. This choice might seem strange, given the diverse and beautiful environments available throughout British Columbia. The southwestern corner, home to cities like Vancouver, is bustling and packed with people, presenting a sharp difference from the sunny, productive, yet less populated areas like the Okanagan Valley. People's preference for this part of the province is interesting and worth thinking about. Is it the city amenities and job chances that the southwest area offers that draw people in? Or perhaps the charm of living near the coast, even if it means more rain? British Columbia, stretching vast in the western part of Canada, is a huge place. It's so expansive that even if you were to fit the entire state of Texas within its borders, there would still be over 124,200 square miles left unoccupied. Despite its grand size, about 60% of its population is clustered in just a small section in the southwest. This fact makes the majority of the province thinly populated, leaving vast areas with few people. Historically, the patterns of where people decide to live and establish communities in British Columbia have roots that go deep. In the early days of settlement and development, pioneers and newcomers chose specific areas for their new homes and businesses. These initial decisions on where to settle have long-term effects, influencing where people continue to live generations later. These choices were likely influenced by various factors, including access to the ocean, natural resources, trade possibilities, and the land's suitability for agriculture and building. Today, this pattern remains, with new factors also coming into play. The urban areas in the southwest, particularly around Vancouver, offer a variety of job opportunities, educational institutions, healthcare facilities, and cultural attractions that are not as readily available in the more remote or rural areas. Moreover, the infrastructure in these urban centers is more developed, making daily life and business operations easier. From silent forests to noisy cities, see how British Columbia's towns turned into centers of hope and activity for new arrivals. The only reason why everyone wants to live in cities in British Columbia. In the beginning, people chose to make their homes in places like Vancouver and Victoria. These cities are close to the sea, making them perfect spots for boats to arrive and leave. This was super important back in the day because it helped with trading, moving goods and stuff from one area to another. Victoria, found on Vancouver Island, turned into a key trading hub. It was such an important city that, before it became part of the larger mainland area, it was actually the main city for the entire region. On the other hand, Vancouver is located on the mainland, not on an island. It quickly grew into a large city, partly because it was a handy spot for ships, and also because it was connected to the rest of Canada by a significant railway system. Early on, Vancouver and Victoria managed to pull ahead of other places. They became centers where many jobs were created and businesses began. As time went on, they expanded even more, benefiting from their head start in development. Vancouver earned a reputation as a gateway to countries across the Pacific Ocean, turning into a hotspot for jobs in the tech industry, film production, and finance sectors like banking. Victoria carved out its own unique niche. While it also grew in size and importance, it became known for having a lot of government jobs and became a big draw for tourists. These cities didn't just grow because they were near the sea. There were other reasons too. The natural harbors provided safe and easy access for ships, which encouraged more trade and interaction with other places. This trade brought wealth and people to the cities, helping them grow. The connection to the rest of Canada through the railway in Vancouver meant goods and people could move easily across the country, making the city a crucial part of national trade and communication. Cities in British Columbia are like magnets because they have many job opportunities, educational institutions, and entertaining activities. These attractions make a lot of people want to move there. Folks are drawn to these urban areas because they're looking for jobs and they want to enjoy the hustle and bustle of city life. This explains why so many people decide to settle in these bustling areas of British Columbia, despite the fact that there are vast, empty spaces available in other regions of the province. But it's not just the cities in British Columbia that are responsible for why the population is concentrated in certain areas. The natural environment plays a big part too. The landscape is filled with mountains and tough terrains which make it very difficult to construct homes or develop large communities. Imagine the challenge of trying to erect a house on a steep slope or in the dense wilderness. It's a tough task indeed. This scenario is common in much of British Columbia. The coastal and Rocky Mountains act like huge barriers that prevent the expansion of communities and the construction of new buildings. The rugged nature and the expansive wilderness create barriers to travel and living in many regions of the province. Further away from the coastal areas, in the interior or northern parts of British Columbia, there's a vast expanse of natural beauty. Here you find endless forests, diverse wildlife, and hidden treasures beneath the earth like minerals. However, despite these natural resources, there are few towns or cities. This lack of urban development is due to several factors. The temperatures in these areas can drop extremely low, making living conditions harsh. The accessibility is also limited. Reaching these areas by car or train can be challenging. Plus, the land is often not flat, presenting difficulties for building homes or establishing businesses. This combination of harsh climate, difficult access, and challenging landscapes keeps many people from moving to and living in these less populated parts of British Columbia. But people do like living near the water where the land is flat and the weather is nicer. That's why lots of folks have moved to places along the coast. Even with this, there are a few spots inside British Columbia that have drawn people. Take Kelowna, for example. It's in the middle of the Okanagan Valley, which is really good for growing fruits and making wine. People like living there because of the farms, the wine, and the pretty landscape. But apart from Kelowna and the big cities on the coast, most of the land in British Columbia doesn't have many people living on it. These places might be beautiful and full of nature, but they don't have enough jobs or roads or schools to make lots of people want to move there. Now let's talk about how many people live in these places. The biggest bunch of people, around 2.6 million, live in the Vancouver area. That's a lot of people. Next comes Victoria, which is smaller but still has about 400,000 people. Together, Vancouver and Victoria have more than half of all the people living in British Columbia. After them, Kelowna is the next biggest place, with about 230,000 people. It's not as big as Vancouver or Victoria, but it's still a pretty big town. Then there's Abbotsford with 200,000 people, and Nanaimo and Kamloops, each with about 115,000. Chilliwack has a little bit less, with 113,000 people. And after that, you don't really find any places in British Columbia with more than 100,000 people. The whole story of how Canada came to own all of Vancouver Island, even though a bit of it stretches below the 49th parallel, which is usually the line that divides Canada and the United States, is really about old deals and discussions from the past that decided where the border between these two big countries should go. This line, the 49th parallel, became super important back in the early 1800s. Explore the old arguments that set British Columbia's boundaries. A single line on a map decided the area's future and how two countries shared the land. The fine line that split a continent. Let's take a closer look and understand this better. Picture this. It's the 1800s. And in the northwest corner of what we now call the United States, there's this huge area of land. This land, full of tall green forests, towering mountains, and wide, rushing rivers, was really something special. The United States named this place the Oregon Country. At the same time, the British, who were in control of the area we now know as Canada, called it the Columbia District. Both the British and the Americans saw how wonderful this land was, and naturally, both wanted it for themselves. As you might guess, this didn't sit well with either group, leading to a lot of disagreement and heated discussions. The story gets more interesting as time went on. By the year 1846, after many years of back-and-forth negotiations, arguments, and probably quite a few sleepless nights, the United States and British finally came to an agreement. They called this agreement the Oregon Treaty, and it was a pretty significant moment. This treaty was important because it clearly defined the border between what would eventually become Canada and the United States. They decided that this border would be along the 49th parallel, which is a line that runs across the globe. This line would stretch from the high peaks of the Rocky Mountains all the way to the marine waters of the Strait of Georgia. Now, here's the twist in the tale. There's an island called Vancouver Island, located just off the western coast. It's a big piece of land, surrounded by water and full of nature. Most of this island sits above the 49th parallel, but there's a catch: the southern tip, where the now bustling city of Victoria is located, sits just below this line. Now, according to the strict terms of the treaty, this could have meant the island being split into two parts, but imagine how confusing and upsetting that would be for the people living there. So, the treaty made a special exception. It declared that, instead of dividing the island, the whole of Vancouver Island, including the part below the 49th parallel, would remain under British control. This decision was made for a handful of reasons. First off, cutting the island into pieces would have been a mess. Imagine trying to run a place where one part is in one country and the other part is in another country. It would be confusing for everyone. Plus, the part of the island that's below the 49th parallel, where Victoria is really important for boats and ships because it's right on the sea. The British really wanted to keep all of the island so they could use it to protect their boats and have a safe place for them to stop on the way to other parts of the Pacific Ocean. The British also had this place called the Esquimalt Naval Base on Vancouver Island. This base was super important for their navy, kind of like a home for their ships in the Pacific Ocean. By keeping the whole island, the British made sure they could keep using this base. So because of all these reasons, not wanting to split the island, keeping things less confusing, and making sure they had a good spot for their ships, the treaty said all of Vancouver Island would stay British. This meant that when Canada became its own country later, it got the whole island, not just the top part. This is a cool example of how history, geography, and old agreements all come together to decide things like where the border goes between countries. Having a strong navy was super important for Britain to keep its power and interests safe in the Pacific Ocean. This was especially true because the United States was becoming stronger and was moving its boundaries further west. The British knew they had to protect their lands and the routes their ships took. That's why places like Vancouver Island were so important. They needed spots where their ships could stop, get supplies, and be safe. It was all about making sure they could keep an eye on their part of the world, especially with the United States growing so close by. Now jump ahead in time, and you'll see that Vancouver Island is still a part of Canada, even though if you look at a map, a chunk of it sits lower than the 49th parallel. This line is usually where we think the bottom of Canada is, except for a few special spots like Vancouver Island. This is all because of the history and deals made a long time ago. But not every place with this kind of situation ended up the same. For example, there's a place called Point Roberts, which is a little piece of the United States sticking into Canadian land. It's kind of strange because it's part of Washington State, but you have to go through Canada to get there from the rest of the US. Has British Columbia's rugged beauty hidden more than we can see, or have we uncovered all its secrets? Share your thoughts and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more.